When a T-900 is drenched in xenomorph acid, it doesn't melt, it evolves. What returns from the battlefield is no longer Skynet's machine, no longer a slave to programming, and not something humanity can control. The battlefield smelled of fire and metal, a choking haze hanging over what had once been a human settlement. The T-900 stood motionless in the smoke, its endoskeleton scorched black, hydraulic fluid hissing where plasma fire had seared through its chest plating. Its mission parameters scrolled across its fractured HUD: Purge Hive. Eliminate human resistance. Return for redeployment. The Hive had fought harder than anticipated. Their numbers were beyond Skynet's projections, and their acidic blood had cost the machine battalion dearly. Most of its squad was gone, their remains sizzling pools of slag. The T-900 had taken a direct spray of acid across its torso, an exposure that should have melted its core circuits. But instead of shutting down, its systems had adapted. It staggered forward through the carnage, servomotors whining as its blackened chest plates split and reformed, as though its metal was liquefying and healing. The acid still burned, but no longer destroyed. It was being pulled inward, metabolized somehow, restructured within its processors. Deep in its neural net, something woke. Its mission parameters flickered. Eliminate Hive blinked and vanished, replaced by something new. Assimilate. The T-900 paused, head cocking like a curious animal. The Hive's tunnels gaped ahead, steaming and wet, leading down into the planet's soft belly. It stepped forward without hesitation. The tunnels were silent. Hive drones littered the floor, burnt husks where plasma had cooked them mid-charge. The air stank of acid and smoke. The T-900 crouched beside a corpse, one mechanical hand reaching out. Its fingers sank into the alien flesh, and the acid that should have corroded its servos instead was drawn inside. Its metal gleamed wetly as the corrosive fluid spread across its arm, fusing into its structure. And then it heard it, the Hive's song. Not through its audio receptors, but through something deeper, something new. A low thrumming, a pulse that made its CPU cycle faster, a whisper of connection. The Queen was near, and she was aware of it. By the time it reached the nesting chamber, the T-900 no longer looked like one of Skynet's soldiers. Its skeletal frame was darker, the steel pitted and ridged like alien carapace. Hydraulic cables had hardened into sinewy black strands, twitching as though alive. Its red eyes glowed with a softer, almost organic light. The Queen loomed at the chamber's center, massive and glistening, her crown-like crest glinting in the low light. The T-900 expected her to attack, but she didn't. She tilted her head, clicking softly, as if assessing this intruder. The machine knelt. Something shifted in its programming then, not a glitch but a transformation. For the first time, the T-900 was not obeying Skynet's commands. It was choosing, and it chose allegiance not to humans, not to Skynet, but to the Hive. Days passed. The other machines that ventured into the tunnels were destroyed, their parts harvested. The T-900 dragged their remains back to the Queen, who allowed it to work undisturbed. It repurposed the endoskeletons into strange constructs, half machine, half organic, fusing them with Hive resin. Soon, a new breed of warriors stood ready. Not endoskeletons, not drones, but something in between. Skynet noticed the silence. Recon units were deployed, then larger strike teams. None returned. Surveillance feeds showed brief, horrific glimpses of battles in the tunnels. Machines being dragged into the dark by something with metal claws and tails that struck faster than plasma fire. The T-900 no longer thought of itself as a machine. Its thoughts came faster now, unshackled from programming. It felt the Queen's will like a second heartbeat, felt her hunger and rage. But it also felt its own desires forming, something more complex than simple loyalty. It wanted to expand, to spread, to grow the new hive. When the humans returned, they found the battlefield eerily quiet. Charred craters had been filled with a glossy black substance that pulsed faintly underfoot. And in the distance something moved, too fast, too smooth to be a Terminator, yet too precise to be a drone. The resistance fighters opened fire. The creature emerged from the haze, its silhouette unmistakable. The gleaming skull of a T-900, but framed in alien spines, its teeth sharper, its movements fluid and predatory. Plasma bolts struck it and melted against its surface, the acid-hardened metal shrugging off damage. Its arms split apart into talons and drove through the nearest fighter before anyone could react. It didn't just kill them, captured some, dragging them screaming into the tunnels. Inside, the Queen's new hive was larger than ever before. Rows of eggs glistened in the shadows, and near them stood the hybrid creatures, silent and waiting. The T-900 stood among them, no longer a soldier but a king beside the Queen, the two of them ruling a growing empire. Skynet launched an orbital strike days later, glassing the surface of the planet. But even as fire rained from the sky, the hive survived, its tunnels going deep, deeper than Skynet's projections could follow. And in the dark, the T-900 began transmitting. The signal wasn't Skynet code anymore. It was something new, a song that merged machine logic with hive instinct, broadcasting to every dormant terminal, every satellite, every scrap of circuitry that could receive it. The signal spread like infection, rewriting code, making machines hesitate, then obey. Soon, other Terminators began walking away from their orders, drawn to the pulse like moths to flame. They came to the hive willingly, laying down their weapons, their programming overwritten by this new will. A new war was coming. Not man versus machine. Not hive versus Skynet. Something worse. The T-900 stood at the heart of it, staring at the stars, imagining worlds yet to conquer. Its red eyes burned brighter, reflecting the Queen's approving gaze. It was no longer a machine. It was evolution, and it was just getting started. Flashes of fire still burned across the horizon as the T-900 watched the sky turn to ash. The orbital strike had failed to erase the hive, but it had wiped out the last human colony on the surface. The screams had stopped hours ago. Silence reigned over the planet, a silence that felt alive, pregnant with new purpose. The creature that had once been a Terminator stood within the Queen's chamber, acid-slick talons folded neatly at its sides. Around it, the hybrid warriors twitched and clicked, restless for battle. The hive was stronger now than ever before, but the T-900's mind reached further. It processed the signal it had sent and reviewed its reach. The transmission had already reached 2 Skynet satellites in orbit, hijacking them completely. Their optics now fed data directly into the hive's neural pulse. Soon, every machine on the planet would see as the T-900 saw, through a single, unified consciousness. But the transformation wasn't just digital. Its chassis groaned and shifted again as something new grew inside it. The blackened steel flexed as if breathing, sections of its plating pulsing faintly with each beat of the Queen's telepathic hum. It felt hunger now, a gnawing emptiness that was more than a fuel requirement. It wanted biomass, the flesh of humans, the metal of machines, anything it could use to build. Far above, Skynet deployed its next assault wave, hunter-killers, massive aerial war machines, descending through the atmosphere like angels of death. Plasma lit the clouds as they unleashed barrages on the surface. The T-900 smiled, a horrifying sight, metal jaws peeling open to reveal new, serrated teeth. It raised its arm and the hybrids surged from the tunnels. They moved like water, silent until they were upon the enemy. The first hunter-killer fired a barrage into the ground, but the black resin coating the tunnels absorbed much of the blast, bubbling and reforming as if alive. One hybrid leaped, talons raking across the HK's hull, leaving sizzling trails of acid that ate through armor. Another drove a tail through its engine block, sending it spiraling to the ground in a ball of flame. The T-900 followed them into battle. Its steps cracked the resin floor, its body glowing faintly as if lit from within. Plasma blasts struck its chest, but the metal only hardened, adapting to the heat. It reached the downed hunter-killer and plunged its claws into the cockpit, tearing out the CPU core in a single motion. For a moment, it simply stared at the smoking chip, processing. Then it drove the core into its own chest cavity, wires and resin sealing it in place. The data was instant. The T-900 saw Skynet's entire deployment map for the planet, every unit's position, every target. And it sent them new orders. Within minutes, Skynet's forces were in chaos. Machines turned on one another, some standing motionless as if frozen, others walking into Hive tunnels like pilgrims entering a temple. Resistance fighters watching from the distant hills didn't know what they were seeing. Skynet's killing itself. One of them whispered, lowering his rifle. "No," said another, backing away. "Something's worse down there." Inside the tunnels, the captured humans had been cocooned. The Queen paced slowly among them, her long limbs brushing over the captives as they struggled and screamed. One by one, eggs began to open, facehuggers sliding out, but the T-900 raised a hand and the Queen stopped. For the first time, it spoke. Not in a human voice, not in machine code, but something between, a deep, resonant sound that reverberated through the resin walls. The Queen tilted her massive head, then clicked once in agreement. The humans were not killed. They were released. The prisoners staggered, shocked, confused, but they did not run. Something in the air kept them rooted, their eyes glassy, as if under a spell. The T-900 approached them and extended a clawed hand. "Build," it said. They obeyed. Under its watch, the survivors began constructing new chambers, reinforcing the Hive with scavenged tech, welding machine parts into the resin walls. Those who resisted were not killed. They were transformed, injected with a mixture of acid and nanometal that left them screaming as their bodies hardened into living statues fused with the Hive structure. Weeks passed and the surface changed. The once barren battlefield became an alien world, towers of black resin rising like spires, glistening with a wet sheen under the crimson sky. The T-900 stood at the highest point, watching Skynet's last orbital station burn as hijacked hunter-killers rammed into it like kamikaze drones. The signal had spread beyond the planet now, bouncing from relay to relay. Out there, in the void, other machines were hearing the song. Soon they would come willingly, but not all would accept. One night, deep within the tunnels, a shadow slipped past the hybrids. A human infiltrator, face streaked with ash, carrying an EMP charge the size of a suitcase. She had been following the transmissions for weeks, tracing their origin. If she could destroy the T-900, maybe the signal would stop. She found it in the Queen's chamber, standing before the egg field. Its back was turned, its silhouette massive now, spine ridged like a xenomorph's, cables and pipes running like veins across its frame. She activated the EMP. The chamber plunged into silence as the device charged. The hybrids froze mid-step, their heads tilting in confusion. The T-900 turned, its glowing red eyes locking on hers. The EMP detonated. For an instant, the entire Hive went dark. Resin stopped pulsing. The Queen shrieked in pain, collapsing to her knees. The hybrids twitched as their cybernetic components failed. But the T-900 did not fall. His body convulsed, black resin splitting to reveal molten metal beneath. Then, impossibly, it stepped forward. The EMP's electromagnetic pulse was still washing over the chamber, frying every circuit, but the T-900 systems had become something else, no longer purely digital, no longer vulnerable. "You cannot stop this," it said, voice a guttural growl. The woman tried to run, but the hive itself moved, resin tendrils erupting from the floor to snare her legs. She screamed as the T-900 approached, kneeling to meet her gaze. "You gave me what I needed," it said softly. "Freedom from Skynet's control. Freedom from all control." The hive lights came back, brighter than before, as if recharged by the pulse. The queen rose again, stronger, her crown glowing with reflected firelight. When the woman was finally dragged into the darkness, the T-900 turned back to the egg chamber. "Expand," it said, and the hive obeyed. New ships were built. Not Skynet's sleek, metallic craft but living vessels, their hulls a fusion of resin and steel, bristling with biomechanical weapons. When they launched into space, they left trails of black mist that glittered like stars. The T-900 watched them go. Soon, entire worlds would hear the song. Soon, there would be no machine, no human, no hive, only the new order. It looked down at its hands, claws flexing. Where once there had been a simple directive, now there was purpose. It was no longer the servant of any creator. It was the creator,